This week, legendary film critic Gene Shalit passed away at the age of 100. First of all, anybody who can make it to 100, respect. Second, anybody who can rock that hairstyle and mustache, double respect. I'm working on it, Gene. But with this loss, it's one more reminder that criticism as an art form is kind of over. Now, that's not to say that criticism doesn't exist anymore, far from it. It's everywhere you look. Any schmuck with a TikTok account thinks that he can be a critic. And I am aware of the irony of saying this as a schmuck with a TikTok account. But criticism today is not what it used to be. Guys like Gene Shalit, Leonard Maltin, the kings of the genre, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, they were cut from a different cloth than modern critics. Let me explain. Criticism of art has been around almost as long as art itself, ever since the day Ugg the caveman drew a saber-toothed tiger on the wall and then Gronk the caveman told him that it lacked nuance. People have always had opinions and always expressed them. And once the printing press made things like newspapers and magazines commercially viable, criticism exploded. Not only did those periodicals publish short stories and poetry, they published criticism of short stories and poetry. In fact, for much of his life, one of my favorite subjects, Edgar Allan Poe, whom Gene Shalit spent his entire life trying to outdo in the mustache department, was probably more commercially successful as a critic of other people's writing than he was as a writer of his own work. In my high school, there was this massive encyclopedia-style set of books in the library. I think it was called something like the Handbook of Literary Analysis, where we would look up criticism of these older works that came out in the years after those works were published. It helped us to understand the context behind them, because unlike modern critics, I had teachers who understood that context actually matters. Then came television, and it made the critics personalities in their own right. Siskel and Ebert had their own show where they would not only analyze the movies, but they would debate them with each other. Once they were popular, other critics started getting their spots on TV too. Gene Shalit was on the Today Show, and these people just kept growing in prominence. Kids, believe it or not, there was a time when Siskel and Ebert could make or break a movie with a twitch of their thumbs. That doesn't really exist anymore, and the big reason is, well, the way that you're watching this, the internet. Blog culture allowed any bozo with a keyboard to turn themselves into a critic. And again, I am saying this as one of those bozos. I spent years reviewing comic books and movies for the sadly defunct site comicstream.com. It was a great time. I very much enjoyed doing it, but that was at a time where there were millions of other people doing exactly the same thing. The idea here is that the internet democratized criticism, which is true, but like a lot of things, there's both a good and a bad to that. The good is that now anybody could become a critic. The bad is that now anybody can become a critic. When there are too many voices, it gets harder and harder to find the ones that are actually worth listening to. And a lot of the people who do criticism these days think it just means whining and complaining. Sites like How It Should Have Ended sacrifice analysis for comedy, which would be fine if it weren't for the number of viewers who don't seem to understand the difference. There are way too many people who think that if a movie doesn't fit their particular headcanon, that means that it wasn't any good. People who think that just because something isn't necessarily for them means that it's a failure. And people who consider it a public service to bully an actor until she quits social media. A real critic, a good critic, is somebody who can analyze a piece of art while giving their opinion on it. They can not only explain what they think makes something good or bad, they can do it in a persuasive manner. Criticism is inherently opinionated, of course, and there's no such thing as a right or wrong opinion, but there are good and bad ways to express that opinion. I didn't always agree with Siskel and Ebert, but I watched their show every week because I knew that even if I thought that they were totally off base, they would at least have an interesting reasoning behind their analysis. Saying that something is derivative of previous works? Okay. Saying that a plot is boring, nonsensical, difficult to follow? That's an opinion, but it's legitimate. Saying that the performances are wooden, the special effects look cheap, the scares don't scare? All perfectly valid. But it sucks is not a valid criticism. That's not how I would have done it is not a valid criticism. This does not align with 100% fidelity to my personal political belief system is not a valid criticism. Restore the Snyderverse is not, actually that's just the stupidest one of all. And the worst part is that most of the professional critics these days came up in this stupid, horrific clickbait culture. It's gotten harder and harder to find a critic that's actually worth reading, which is one of the reasons that I personally don't give a damn what the critic score is on Rotten Tomatoes. You can be clever as a critic. You can be funny. You can be entertaining. But none of that matters if you're not also fair about it. I still write criticism, sure. I've got a blog where I post about twice a week, and a lot of the time there is critical analysis in it. But But I do that mainly because I enjoy doing it, not because I think I'm actually influencing anybody. But even if it's a blog I don't think anybody else is going to read, not even my wife, because she doesn't seem to notice when I send her the link a lot of the time, I still do the best that I can to be fair and informative when expressing my opinion. It's a lost art. So thank you, Gene. We shall never see your like or your mustache again. So Eddie, you think this week's video gets 2 thumbs up?
Yes.
He's very generous with his critiques.